Welcome back to the channel, babe.
Thanks.
This is our second video. Thank you again for doing this. I think we're calling this one Homecoming.
Yes.
So, do you want to take it away?
Sure. So this is, I guess, really the second homecoming for us. This was his second deployment. So a little recap, we have been together for 3 years. Not like physically together, maybe 8 months because of all the TDYs and traveling and deployments. So we went from hadn't known each other to married and had a kid and a couple deployments under our belt in that amount of time. So Brian came back January 2008 timeframe, and I don't know. I've seen, those videos of homecomings, where they have all the people and the flags and the posters and all that. I don't know if that's a typical homecoming. We never experienced anything like that. First time, I think I picked him up at the shop. I think someone from a shop got him, and I picked him up there. And this time, I don't know how it turned into this, but I was picking him up from the airport with our 10-month-old daughter. He was the only one deployed from the base, so he was the only one who needed picked up. And so, Meredith and I drove out to the airport, which was about an hour away, and I think he came in kind of late evening, if I remember right, with tons of bags, of course. And we were really excited to see him. I don't remember how much time passed from leaving Iraq to North Carolina, but it was
40 hours.
40 hours. So it was a pretty quick, turnaround from full-on deployment work to welcome home. And so we were excited to see him. Loaded him up in the truck. It was a snowstorm in North Carolina. They don't do snowstorms very well. And our daughter hated the car. So cried the whole way. Snowy roads. We had to stop at the shop because we had his weapon. We needed to get checked in. Brought him home. Got things kind of unloaded. And that's how homecoming went for that one. So it was, I didn't really understand the implications of the speed at which he left Iraq to getting home. I was just excited that, yay, he was getting home sooner than, expected. So I think I've learned what that meant much later, just where he was at. He didn't have any downtime to kind of process anything. He just got home and was kind of expected to jump right back into home civilian-ish life. So we got him home, and I think he had a day to kind of sleep and catch up on things, and I was really anxious to surprise him with my year-long project while he was deployed. He had a favorite chair that he loved, and it was covered in sheets, because it was not the best-looking chair. And so I decided to reupholster it for him. I have no idea how to reupholster. Checked out a couple books from the library and tore it apart. And then put it back together for him. And I'm actually sitting in it right now. It's been well loved. I gave him a bag of staples, all the staples I pulled out of it, and he had to figure out, what did this go to? I don't know how amused he was with that. I found out years later that he was really excited about replacing this chair. I didn't know that. He graciously, was very kind, and we still have the chair.
Always will.
We don't have to. So Brian got home, he was also getting out of the military. So I think he was doing in-processing stuff from his deployment on base. And then also working on getting out of the military. And he had a lot of leave built up, of course. So he had worked it out. So he was home most of the time. He just went to work a couple days a week or whatever. And I'm still working from home full time. And I was kind of working my schedule around Meredith's happy times when she was either napping or in a good mood so I could actually function. And I'd been just juggling everything, and I didn't know how to let go of things. Because I had all the balls balanced in the air, and I didn't know how to let that go and give some of that back to Brian. So he comes home, with a lot of responsibilities that he had, and then everything was handled. He didn't need to do anything, which didn't make him feel very needed, I think. So I struggled with that. And there was a lot of, I think there were quite a few nights where he would drink quite a bit, and he would, tell stories from his deployment. And, there was laughter, there was a lot of frustration and anger, there were tears, and some of it was hard to hear. And I would get a bit emotional, and, his response, at least at that time, was kind of like, well, what are you crying for? You don't really understand what this was like. And so that was kind of hard. I was trying to just listen and be there. I didn't know what else to do, honestly. I didn't know what he needed. So yeah, just guessing really how to best help Brian and help him process these things. And, I had that little pamphlet that said, just give him time. So this was me trying to, work through this. There were still things, though, like we'd have the fan running in our room, and that would wake him up in the middle of the night because just the sound of it or whatever would sound like something from his deployment. And we'd go places and he'd be more anxious, or stuff on the side of the road was, cause a lot of anxiety, and I wouldn't understand. He would just, get really uptight and frustrated, and, why aren't you, X, Y, and Z? And I don't know. It's not like the war zone that he had come from, and I had no idea. So we were working through some of that and trying to figure out the things that, cause him anxiety. And so that was a bit of a transition for both of us. And then just still trying to figure out married life in general. I mean, it's hard to segregate sometimes, what is just normal married life things, because there are struggles there, and what was to do with the deployment, what's new or different since the deployment. There was still a lot that we were trying to figure out just together as in our relationship. So it's hard for me to pull apart what was what, and it was probably a little bit of both, really. And there were things, and part of it was just him being away and me being, single parenting. Why is the high chair such a mess? And it's like, well, it's clean enough because I'm trying to do all these things. And, and those kinds of things would sting. And I'm like, I'm trying really hard. And it was hard to, hear that. He wasn't wrong. It wasn't as clean as I'd like it to be, but I had only so much energy and time and everything else. And we hadn't parented together, really. So trying to figure out, parenting styles 10 months into having a child, I've been doing things the way I thought needed to be done, and then integrating Dad into the equation and figuring out what he wanted to do and how to do that together. And so there was a lot of that part of it too, just working out our relationship. But we also had some struggles that I think definitely were from the deployment. This deployment, there was a lot of stress just from the people Brian had to work with. He was really just seemed to be battling a lot with various people on a day-to-day basis. It was a lot of stress, and he would get really mad at me for things. I can't come up with any specific examples, but just, I was exhibiting traits of some of these people that he had been working with for this whole year and a half. And, he would get really angry at me, and I'm sitting there trying to decide how much of this was, something I did, and how much of is this reaction from this year and a half long slog. And I'm just hearing, I'm getting the brunt of it, is how it felt. And that was really hard. That was really hard, and caused us a lot of strife for quite a while. At some point in there, I think we decided to go see a counselor on base or therapist. I think twice, maybe 3 times. I don't remember really anything useful coming out of that. It gave us a chance to kind of talk a little bit, but I don't remember it being productive in any way, shape, or form. PTSD was never brought up, never even, I don't know, considered, it seemed. And of course, he's getting out of the military and going through, figuring out disability. And again, PTSD did not come up with any of that. He did get some disability for some other things, but nothing about, any mental health issues. So, we're just figuring, we're, have to give it time and it'll be fine. Probably 3 to 4 months into this, though, I'm starting to get impatient with the whole process. Brian's angry a lot of the times. It doesn't feel like we're making any progress. It felt like we were still at the same spot. It was just, we're not getting anywhere. And I think I, at some point, said, well, how long is this going to take? Like, they said, give it some time. Well, how long? Of course, they don't tell you how long because everyone's different, but I had no idea what I was in for. I don't think Brian did either. And of course, that statement did not go over well. That was, I think, really hard for Brian to hear. Because he didn't know how long things were going to take. And it's really hard when things are not going very well for the two of us. It just seemed like no matter how many times he would tell the stories and try to process it, the anger didn't get less, the frustration, it didn't seem to help. And I didn't have any more tools to help. So it started to get difficult for both of us.
It's pretty telling that you were the only person available for me to tell those stories to. There was no other counselor, therapist, mechanism, friend, coworker that was available to help me so that Alysia didn't have to be the sole, bear the brunt of everything I was trying to work through.
Yes. I mean, in your in-processing, your person who called and asked, how you're doing, that was about all he got, and he said, well, it was pretty, messed up or whatever, gave the story, and they were no help.
Maybe it's worth being specific about that story. I get my timelines mixed up, but after my first deployment, I came back and was in the office talking with my master sergeant, and the phone rang, and it was Major so-and-so from the med group to do my mental health checkup or whatever. I had filled out a questionnaire on my in-processing from that deployment. Did you see any horrors of war, basically? And I had indicated yes, and he was following up on that answer to that questionnaire. And he says, well, what did you see? And I said, well, I had to search a dead body for explosives on an incident. And dead silence on the other end of the line. And I waited a few seconds and I said, you still there, sir? And then I hear whispered, mumbled, that's f***ed up. I said, excuse me? And the major goes, oh, well, how are you doing with that? And I said, I'm fine. He said, oh, well, good. Well, have a good day.
And that was it.
That was my mental health in processing. Yep.
So I was it.
Yeah, you were it, unfortunately, and unfairly.
And quite unprepared. one thing that ended up being some source of processing tool, I don't know what to call it really, was while Brian was deployed, he talked of really wanting to get a Jeep. And also going on a long 2-month trip to just go see family, go see places. So shortly after he got back, found a Jeep, and we went and got it and put it in the garage, and he spent hours. I mean, he would just get his coffee in the morning and then go out there, and I wouldn't see him most of the day. Where there was a lot of banging and cursing and tearing things out and finding new things. And, you know, I did help him with some of it, but...
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Yep.
But, you know, got a Jeep, and he spent a lot of time out there, and I think that was probably the best thing for him at that time. 'Cause I think that was 2 months solid, probably, of just working in the garage and doing something with his hands that, you know, was productive. And then because of the trip he had talked about, you know, we started planning that. I wasn't sure on the phones, you know, on our phone calls while he was deployed, whether he was serious about that. Because I'm like, oh, that's quite an undertaking. And he knew that Meredith really didn't like the car. There were times that he would call me and I'd be driving, and we'd spend the whole phone call with me, with my cell phone over the seat, with him on a satellite phone going, shh, 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 trying to get Meredith to settle down in the car. She did not like cars. But he was serious about going on this trip. So we got to planning, got ourselves a atlas and DVD player for Meredith, and started, you know, figuring out our route and who we were going to see and all that kind of stuff. And we were going to tent, you know, do some camping and ORV park. So we had to get all our gear and figure out how we were going to load all the vehicles up and everything else. And yeah, so we left June of 2008 on our big 2-month excursion. You know, we're still trying to figure it all out.
I really wanted to see the breadth of this country that I'd been defending. And yeah, not this maybe the smartest thing we've ever done, but we made it.
We did.
So
it was a good timing as far as, you know, between, you know, leaving the military and whatever was going to be next for him. And I had a job where I could, as long as I had internet connection, you know, I could make that work. And other than Meredith being a terrible traveler, you know, she was not at a bad age. She was, you know, starting to get mobile, and, you know, it was, ended up being quite the trip.
yeah, that's a story for next time.
Yep.
Thanks, babe.
You're welcome.